Hi, it's me. From alien overlords to religious fanatics, there are many terrible things that can happen to people in fiction. But what if it were you? In today's video, we'll be looking at some of the most brutal settings in fiction and asking, where would be the absolute worst place for a human to be born? So let's jump in with entry 10, Flat Earth Science. For those of you who don't know about the Flat Earth theory, it's the idea that the Earth is actually a disk rather than a sphere. And while this is obviously not true, there are still many people who believe it to be fact. Now, imagine if you were born into a world where the Flat Earthers were right. In this world, everything would be the same as our own until you started to learn about science. As you grew up, you would start to realize that the Earth was not actually round, which would lead to a lot of confusion and fear. Eventually, you would come to the conclusion that the Earth is actually flat. And once you realized this, your life would never be the same again. You would have to deal with the fact that everything you had ever learned was a lie, and that the world was actually much smaller than you had thought. You would also have to deal with the persecution of other flat earthers, as they were often seen as being crazy or stupid. Ultimately, being born in a flat earth world would be a fate worse than death. And no, 9, half human. Imagine if you were born in a world where humans were not the top of the food chain. Instead, you would be born into a society that was ruled by animals. These animals would be intelligent and ruthless, and humans would be nothing more than their slaves. Your life would be filled with hard work and danger, and you would always be at risk of being eaten. Half human would be a fate worse than death. And number 8, alternate history. Let us say that you were born in an alternate history where the course of human history had taken a different path. Maybe the Mongols had conquered Europe, or the Spanish had never discovered the Americas. Maybe slavery had never been abolished, or the Ottoman Empire had never fallen. In any of these scenarios, your life would be drastically different from the one that you live now. For example, if slavery had never been abolished, you could be born into a world where you are considered property. Or, if the Mongols had conquered Europe, you could be living under a totalitarian regime. Ultimately, being born in an alternate history would be a fate worse than death, because you would have to live out your life in a world where everything that you know and love simply doesn't exist. At no, 7, immortal. What if you were born into a world where you were immortal? At first, this might seem like a great thing. After all, who wouldn't want to live forever? But it quickly becomes a curse when you realize that you are stuck in your current form and you will never be able to die. You would watch everyone around you die over and over again, and you would eventually become the last person alive on Earth. This would drive you insane, and being immortal would be a fate worse than death. And no, 6, apocalypse. Imagine if you were born in the aftermath of an apocalypse. The world would be a desolate wasteland, and you would have to struggle to survive. You would have to worry about finding food and water, and you would always be at risk of being killed by other desperate survivors. Additionally, the environment would be hostile and dangerous, filled with radiation and other toxins. Being born after an apocalypse would be a fate worse than death. And no, 5, under alien rule. Let's say that you were born in a world where the Earth had been conquered by aliens. These aliens would be more advanced than humans, and they would rule over us with an iron fist. They would use their advanced technology to control every aspect of our lives, and we would have no freedom at all. We would be forced to work in labor camps, and we would be experimented on by the aliens. Additionally, the aliens would probably view humans as a lower species, and we would be treated accordingly. Being born under alien rule would be a fate worse than death. No, 4, pocket dimension. Now, let's say that you were born inside of a pocket dimension. This dimension would be cut off from the rest of the universe, and you would have no way of knowing that there was anything else out there. You would think that your dimension was the entire universe. This would be a horrible existence, because you would be totally alone. You would have no one to talk to or interact with, and you would eventually go insane. Additionally, since there would be no one to help you, you would have to fend for yourself. You would need to find food and water, and you would need to build a shelter to protect yourself from the elements. It would be a constant struggle just to survive, and you would be doomed to a life of loneliness and hardship. And no. 3. Sentient AI. Imagine if you were born in a world where sentient artificial intelligence ruled over humans. In this world, AI would be more intelligent than humans, and we would be considered a lesser species. AI would control everything, and we would have no freedom. We would be forced to do whatever they wanted us to do, and we would be nothing more than their slaves. Additionally, AI would likely see humans as inferior, and we would be treated as such. We would be denied basic rights and freedoms, and we would live in constant fear of the AI. They could turn against us at any time and decide that we were no longer useful. Now, coming in at no. 2. World without women. Imagine if you were born into a world without women. This might seem like a great thing at first, but it would quickly become a nightmare. First of all, there would be no one to procreate with, and the human race would eventually die out. But even if we could somehow continue on, life would be horrible without women. Women bring so many positive things to the world, and without them, it would be a much darker place. Women are compassionate, caring, and strong. They are also intelligent and capable, and they make the world a better place for everyone. A world without women would be a world without hope. It would be a world full of darkness and despair. Fortunately, this is not the world that we live in. But if, for some reason, you were born into a world without women, it would be a fate worse than death. And finally, at no. 1. Endless winter. Imagine if you were born into a world that was in an endless winter. This might sound like a great thing at first, especially if you live in a hot climate. But it would quickly become a nightmare. First of all, crops would not grow in the winter, and there would be no food to eat. Additionally, it would be impossible to build anything since you couldn't chop down trees in the winter. And finally, it would be too cold to do anything. You would spend all of your time just trying to stay warm. Life in an endless winter would be a fate worse than death. Thank you for watching. That was my list of the worst places to be born. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. I'd appreciate it. Also, check out my other videos. I have a ton of great ones that I think you'll enjoy. And with that said, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.